back in the day, what we used to do when I was growing up is we would always go down to the arcade. I love going to the arcade, getting the tokens, putting them in the machines. But let me tell you what, man, I never knew what to do, especially on the fighting games, Tekken, Street Fighter 2. I would go and play against my brothers and people that were lining their quarters up, and I would just start hitting every button that I could, hoping, praying that one of these buttons would help me get a win. And sometimes in my life and in ministry, I've resulted to button mashing too, not really knowing what to do. So I'm just going to try everything and hit the buttons. The goal of this whole show is to give you real plays, real moves that will help you in your life, in your ministry, whatever area and space you are leading in your life. We want to help you win in every sphere. So welcome to Button Mashing. Today, I've got one of my friends on the call. And man, if you don't know who he is, it's time for you to catch up. He's been rocking in the hip hop world independently. So we could take a lot of time just talking about that. But man, I want to introduce you to one of my great friends, Fedel, on the line. Fedel, how are you? What is going on?
What's up, Pastor? I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for having me. I love you, man. I've been following you for so long, man. You're doing a great job. And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, man, me too. I mean, I don't even really know how long ago we met. I want to say it's like plus 10 years.
Something like that.
Like an upper room at a hotel youth conference in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Like way back. Oh my gosh.
Wow. Yes.
But this guy right here has been so consistent, putting out great music, traveling all over the country, not just at churches, but also at universities. Like I'm telling you, if you're a youth pastor, youth leader, young adults, you're trying to come up with an event, nobody rocks a crowd like Fedel. Nobody.
I ain't perfect, but God love me. Life ugly, facelift.
Today's conversation, we want to talk about celebrating diversity, but we want to get to know you first, Fedel.
Yeah. Man, well, I was actually born in Memphis, Tennessee. And my identity, who I am, so much of who I am comes from Memphis, man. My parents are actually from the South too. And so as from Memphis, even though I was born there, I lived a lot of different places, man. I lived in Detroit, I lived in Oklahoma, I lived in different places, but Memphis is what defined me. And I think because I grew up in Memphis in a time where it was like the murder capital, that itself, the crime, the drugs, all of that also defined me. But even living in neighborhoods where all of that was going on, I also unfortunately was in a broken home. I was in a very abusive home. My father was very verbally abusive. He was physically abusive. And that put a mark on my life that literally carried me through life. And a lot of times we hear, everybody has a story, but a lot of times what happens is when you walk these stories, like for me in the instance, and I get to the part where I say, man, I was a part of drug dealers and gangs and I was loose with women and I was partying and all that stuff. And God brought me out. I want to say that my story began from a broken kid that was hurt, that didn't understand why these things were happening to me, was confused, and then the enemy was able to use that thing to send me down a path that by the grace of God I came out of. But even as God had brought me out, there are things that, because I went through those as a child, that I've had to walk through as an adult, and by the grace of God, it's been able to carry me through those situations.
All of our experiences in life have a way of shaping us, as we become, young adults, parents, professionals, as we move forward. And, your experience, because you've literally traveled across the country, around the world, like you've done it, and you've been inside of churches and you've been inside the secular space and colleges and the whole thing. What do you really believe right now is the need for diversity inside the church? We know in scripture and in Revelation 7:9, after this I looked and behold a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all the tribes and peoples, the language is standing before the throne of the Lamb. Colossians 1:16 says, For by him all things were created on heaven and earth, visible, invisible, thrones, dominions, rules, authorities. All things were created through him and for him. Of course, in Matthew, Jesus's last words are go and make disciples of all nations. So I think a biblical context for diversity is always one that is of celebration. We're celebrating diversity, that God has created each of us. And we are different, but he's created all of us through him, for his use and his glory. And I'm just, for you right now, like from your perspective, where do you see the need for diversity in the church today?
Man, the need is it's so great. So many issues that we have when it comes to diversity is just ignorance. People don't know. I'm sure, Mark, you can agree, we all grew up in some type of silo, some type of world where other groups of people are not a part of that world. And when you grow up like that, like most of us in some way did, you have an ignorance toward other cultures. And so what happens is, especially as you grow and you get into the marketplace and you start doing business, a lot of times your opinions of other people have been driven by media, or it's been driven by entertainment. And when that happens, the conflicts that flare up can be really complicated. And so one of the things that I always say, man, you need to listen to people who don't look like you or don't have the same lifestyle. You need to listen. That is just humanity. But I wasn't taught that. I wasn't taught that. Have I ever sat down and listened to somebody from a different background, different race, and just said, what is it that goes on in their world, and took their word for it? A lot of times what happens is we'll listen to somebody from a different world, but we'll have our filter like, oh, that's what they say, but it's like, no, listening to what goes on in other world and other groups and other people groups is the beginning of ridding your own ignorance, of my own ignorance, of your own ignorance, of all of our own ignorance, and not going in thinking, oh, I already know, because I'm not like the worst people. I'm not like the people that's over there. I already kind of know. No, listening and learning what goes on in other people groups and what are the specific things that go on in that group that doesn't go on in your own group. That basic tip right there would help us tremendously.
Well, I totally agree, man. I think that, as I've been in youth ministry, a young adult ministry for, almost 15, 16 years. And I think that that right there, what you said, is just the art of just listening. Yeah. We try, I think, way too many times as leaders, small group leaders, church leaders, people in general, to try to fix someone rather than listen to someone.
Yeah. And I'll say this. Another thing that I've had to accept is, sometimes you have to challenge how you were raised. One of the hardest things, I have two close friends, who just told me that their father was racist. It was one of the hardest things they had to accept. That doesn't mean their father wasn't a good man in some way, that he didn't provide, or he wasn't nurtured. But in the area of race, he was deep-seated. He had deep-seated hate. And a lot of times, because of the people that we look up to, man, they could be great, do great things, but a lot of times they can have views, because they're all human, that are flawed. And we have to know how to see those things, pick them out, and I'm not saying challenges and tell them, because sometimes you're in a place where if you tell them, they won't listen. But sometimes it's just you saying, I love these things but this thing right here, I know it's wrong, and I have to make sure that I go a different route with this right here. Because it's easy for any group of people to take every people group has ignorance, right? It's just it's easy to take those things and to make that the face of any group. And when you do that, it makes you look at that group of people less than. You don't look at it, you don't have the same value for their life as you do the people who look like you, because you've seen every side of those people. And most of the time, you filter out the negative of the people group you look like, or the silo or whatever that you're around. And so a lot of times you have to look and say, man, like this right here was wrong. And it's one of the toughest things in my travels of having conversations with people. One of the toughest things I've heard behind the scenes is when people say, man, having to admit that I was raised like this, and the people who raised me were great people, but they had this issue, you know? And so that's one of the hardest things I've heard in my travels.
I think we all have our own experience in life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think when it comes to celebrating diversity, I think when we're speaking about listening to people, that we have to continue to have patience for the other side. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so that listening is so big. Like for me as a youth pastor, now given I have not by any means been perfect and done everything right, but I have tried to make room for everybody. Like I think I always try to tell youth pastors and youth leaders, young adults, whatever, is you just go and be you.
Yeah.
Be you. Don't try to be someone you're not, but offer somebody else the same space to be them too. And let them be that, make room for them. And I really believe that is part of celebrating diversity. Is like, I'm not asking you to come and be like me, do worship like me, dress like me, talk. I'm asking you to come be you, be who God made you to be, and add to the family.
That's good. I could, because when people are also when you're celebrating diversity, one of the most important things is to have grace in that celebration.
Yeah, it's so good.
So
man.
yeah, and so when you extend grace to other people, they feel freer. And as those people feel free in groups, you are able to even more learn from those groups. Like, hey, this is something that's a part of their culture, because they feel comfortable sharing. They feel comfortable being a part. And that right there creates what I would consider healthy fellowship.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, fellowship one way isn't really healthy, And so that's really good. I do think that's one of the most important. That's what listening leads to.
Scripture says that they will know us by the way we love each other, not by how great our services are, which that's good, not by how great our worship or the sermons. That's all good. But people are going to know that we are God's, that we are sons and daughters of God by the way we love each other. And I'm telling you, I think that's what celebration is all about. Celebrating each other starts with listening, patience, trust. That way there's some safety in our relationships that between you and your youth leaders or whoever it is. You got to start with trust. We got to develop that bridge.
Yeah, and trust is tough, man, because I do think, we are a generation with trust issues.
Yeah, I agree.
Drake has a song called Trust Issues, and it does represent, and I don't think social media helps a lot of times, because we don't always know what we're getting from people.
Right.
But trust is something that, it's hard to get, but it's easy to lose.
Wow.
And so there definitely has to be, you have to walk with some grace and some sensitivity in order to maintain people's trust in diverse situations. You have to be careful with sarcasm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in diverse situations, sometimes what happens is if there's a different race, right, or different, we'll go into that group, and our goal is to get to a place where we can joke with people, we can make fun of, and a lot of times that's how we come up with they're cool, and that basically means I can make fun of them. You know what I mean? And I think the problem with that is that when those relationships develop, a lot of times they are the levels of the relationship. It's like top bottom. It's like somebody's lower.
Yeah, that's
you want mutual. You want mutual respect. You want the relationships to be mutual, and it's very hard to develop mutual respect and relationships that are healthy. That's based in sarcasm. Yeah. Not saying you won't never get to that point, but sarcasm erodes self-confidence, man. And wow. I'm saying that from my own experience of being somebody who jokes and laughs, and I've learned that even with my kids. But I, especially in relationships like these that are diverse, the first thing we want to do is, we want to get to a place where I can just crack jokes with you. That way I know that you're not going to get offended if I, maybe cross the line. No, it needs to be, hey, I want to get to a place of respect to where they both sides see each other like we're on the same level and both of our worlds matter the same. Wow. That right there is what's going to build. It's going to build healthy diversity, and it's going to build the type of community that people will get delivered. People will be set free, and that's, to me, that's the beginning. Well, I don't want to say the beginning of revival, but it's a big part of what we need for revival.
Man, I totally agree with that. I think that was such a brilliant point. I mean, respect, level playing, like we're not like, it's not one up here and one down. And I think that's where we make a huge mistake as ministry leaders, as small group leaders, is we're trying to reach a generation to have them experience God's love and all these great things. We're trying to do that by conversationally behaving the same way that the world behaves. We're doing it the same way. And like, well, I don't know why we're not, we don't have a better connection, and why, why people aren't sticking around. It's because sarcasm has never been used to build someone up and help them be better.
It's like this. It's like, even as you notice this, I had this conversation with somebody where I said, most of the time as people get older, they don't listen to new music, right? It's just that's a statistic. And I said, and what they do is they end up making fun of younger music from that. It's just, it becomes the commonality of people who get older. It's, hey, did you hear that over there? Oh my God, all their TikToking. And it's like, bro, nobody wants to be consistently made fun of, bro. Like, especially in a time where I think we probably deal with insecurity more than ever, when, there was a time when if you went to school, there was a whole summer where people didn't see friends. Now they see them all year round, you know what I mean, through social media. And it's funny, I was on TikTok today, and which is, I must admit, is extremely funny.
Yeah.
And this girl said, and this girl made a video and says, am I the only person on TikTok who doesn't live in a multi-million-dollar house? Because a lot of the people who post it, their houses are incredible,
No lie.
But anyway, I do think that in the time of comparing, I feel like we're dealing with insecurity more, which when you come back to trying to build a community of diversity, it can make those environments a little more hostile if we don't also deal with, hey, we have some things inside of us that we're kind of working through. Yeah. And we don't, instead of basically falling victim to those feelings, we don't say, man, if I'm dealing with this, imagine what they're dealing with. Like, if I feel this, I feel like I'm not good enough, imagine what they're dealing with. Imagine with everything going on in our country and these issues with that group of people over there, imagine what they're dealing with. If I'm over here dealing with this and they have that going on, and so it's just something to consider.
I wish I would have done better, especially in my earlier years, is building the respect. And I love to laugh, have a good time, give people a hard time. But I feel like, especially in my earlier years, I think that was almost to a detriment, not just at for different cultures, but I think with people in general. It's got to be about building people when it comes to, I guess, organizationally in church, youth group, young adult, campus life, whatever, whoever, if you're viewing or you're listening, and whatever space you're leading in life organizationally. Bro, what are a couple things from an organizational standpoint? We'll drip it down to personal leadership and that. Like, as an organization, what are like 2 or 3 things practical that we can do as ministry leaders, small group leaders, servant leaders, whatever the title might be? What are some practical things we can do organizationally to begin to celebrate diversity, not just as a one-time event at a weekend of our church or a special event in our youth ministry, but celebrate it from an organizational standpoint?
First of all, that's a great question. There's a number of things. The obvious thing in ministry, a lot of times people are like, well, I need to hire into my worship team. I need to hire somebody from, whatever race that I want him. I want him on my ministry team or whatever. And I would say this, you need to sit down with people in your church who don't look like you, who don't have, or in your business. And I know this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, but you need to start by sitting down and just listening to the people in your church from different groups.
That's
and
good.
The reason why I go back to that is because a lot of times when we say we have friends from a different people group, a lot of time, if those people work for us or they're not on the same as far as financially they're in a lower bracket, they're poor in their group, a lot of times, man, their experience is so much different than somebody who's in middle class or
Right.
somebody upper middle class or somebody who could be in the 3% that has the same rate. And so a lot of times we have to sit down with people in our group, in our church, in our business, and not just make it formal, just sit down and listen and try to make the conversations about more than sports or entertainment. Try to get to a place where you can listen and it can be outside of just talking about The Last Dance, even though The Last Dance documentary is an amazing documentary.
Yeah, real talk.
But yeah, and try to get the conversations outside of that and just listen. You're not needing to be best friends. And a lot of times that it's either on or off. People like, well, I don't know. It's either best friend, no friend. It's like, no, you're not going there to save them, right? This is not where you're trying to adopt or it's not that. It is you're trying to become more familiar with things outside of your world by treating people like they're humans, like literally by treating people like they're human and understanding that most of the time you were not raised to do this, so it's gonna be a little uncomfortable.
Right.
And just kind of moving on. So that, and I also feel, man, telling stories about Black history, it doesn't even have to be formal. If we're talking directly about a pastor, if we're talking about a leader, somebody studying things about history that happened, and I love Martin Luther King, but also things outside of just Martin Luther King that happened that African Americans have contributed to. You don't have to tell the race riots of Tulsa, but just things. It can be Rosa Parks. It can and tell stories in your messages, or when you're talking, you can use examples about different things that happen in history, because a lot of times the only thing people know about Black history is Martin Luther King. Like it's that and the victims, and I'm speaking specifically about African Americans right now, but or when Blacks were victimized. But finding hero stories and it could be Jackie Robinson telling stories and using those as examples and other things. So because what happens is, I'm going to speak as being African American. When you grow up in like school, a lot of times every hero is white. And look, we live in America. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the fact that we have amazing people who have built this country who are Caucasian. But understanding that there are Native Americans who've played a big part, that there are Asian Americans, there are Hispanic people who are building this country, and being able to, when you tell stories, try to tell them out of other people groups, or have people from other people groups come up and speak, even if you have to write what they have to say, having them speak about other things that tie in to your work, and try not to make it all poor me, all poor story. Try to make it strong hero stories. So it feels, so everybody has an Avenger. You know what I mean? Everybody kind of needs an Avenger, And so try to, highlight hero stories and different people groups other than Michael Jordan, other than LeBron James. I'm talking about,
Yeah.
And I will, and I'll also say that, and this is as cliche as this is. I said this the other day. I said, depending on how you were raised, there are some really good TV shows that are predominantly Black that would be really good. I'm speaking specifically not about, just African American, but this applies to any group of people. Watching sometimes we only watch shows that are what I would consider ratchet in each group. So it's like watching Housewives, right? Like it's like every group of people, we got some ratchetness. And sometimes if you only watch those shows and you don't have any interaction with that group of people outside of those, you can think that there's a show called Love and Hip Hop where they just fight across the screen, or Housewives, the girls. That's not real. You know what I mean? Like, but sometimes, like I always said that, and I know this might sound really like kind of soft, but Fresh Prince, you know what I mean, was a show that you've seen impact a lot of people. Yeah. But it was so many positive things about Fresh Prince and how it represented the Black community. Right. You know what I mean? And a lot of times I found myself, right? So for example, if I watched Jerry Seinfeld, right? I never understood Jerry Seinfeld. Sometimes he would come up and I listened to his jokes and I didn't get them. And then one day I was sitting watching his TV show. This is like 2 years ago. I had never seen it. Watching his show, I didn't know he was Jewish. Had no idea. Oh. His show helped me understand that he was Jewish. Now it understands why he talks the way he does. Now his TV show has shown me kind of like what it's like to be Jewish and just, be, whatever role he plays. And I know this sounds really innocent, but I'm just saying, like, something like that was able to help me, like, oh, wow, I didn't even know Jews go through stuff like that, right? Mm. And he's funny, it's entertaining, but it did help me understand something about Jewish culture that I had no idea about. And so sometimes watching shows like watching shows that, when you turn it on, you're like, this might positively represent this community. I say this because we have Netflix, Disney Plus, all these shows, and people are consuming TV. That is a small, entertaining way to just take in something positive about another culture.
Man, that's really good. I'm sitting here thinking about, the different places and different parts of our country, world that we've been brought up in, different types of family structures, whether they be the perfect little family or broken, whatever the case would be. And I think that sometimes we continue to let how we were brought up dictate how we're going to behave today. And I'm not making light of anything that, if you're watching this, that you have gone through at all. It's real. It hurts. It did have an impact. But what I will say is there has to come a point in our life as a follower of Christ, as a person, where we no longer use how we were brought up to be an excuse for how we continue to live today, whether that would have been racist, like flat out, or maybe struggling with genuine acceptance or in celebration of all human beings. We all have a chance to make room for everybody. And I think that's the goal. There's room in the kingdom of God for everyone. So there should be room in our ministries and our personal lives. We have to make a choice, though, to not let our past hold the pen to our future and say, you know what, I know this is the way I was brought up, but I'm going to make a choice. And it's going to be awkward. It's going to be awkward. It's going to feel weird.
And there's a little tension you'll have to be okay living with. There's some tension that you'll kind of, you'll feel it. It's good tension. Just know that awkwardness, it's a good thing. And if you learn to live with that, I kid you not, whatever in your life is going on, you'll get greater at it, because when you learn to live with tension in relationships and you learn to be okay not knowing everything about other people, it grows you in a way that you didn't know you could grow.
Man, that's so good. I was, as we're landing the plane here, if you're a leader, great, or just in every space of your life personally, what are 2 or 3 things practical moves, plays that are the viewers here watching button mashing could plug in to their life. And it could be a small thing that will add up to make a big difference for them personally when it comes to celebrating diversity. What are just a few things that you would say for the person watching this, practical ways? Here's something that you could do today to celebrate.
Yeah. A couple of things that I would do. I would say that if you're a leader, and especially if you're a leader that's a young adult, you're either a young millennial or older Gen Z. First, let me say this, is that Gen Z is I feel like they're the first generation where diversity seems so normal for them. So if I'm talking to Gen Z and I'm talking to young, even millennial, in that group, both of those groups, which I'm a part of, I'm a millennial, both of those groups, diversity is so much easier than it was for their parents, And so I will say this, if you're a leader watching this and you're like, man, how do I celebrate diversity more in my daily life? I will say this, when you're in people groups with people who are not like you, and you, like, let's say you walk into Starbucks and you see her, speak to them. You don't have to start a conversation. Just say hi. Hey, how you doing? If the conversation goes further, then it goes further. But if you see somebody from a different group, just speak. Hey, how you doing? If they're in your neighborhood, just speak. Hey, how you doing? You don't have to start a conversation. You don't need to be best friends, because I see this on and off thing in leaderships. A lot of times they'll meet somebody from a different race and they'll just immediately think they should be best friends. They want to take them on road trips. No. Start with just casual highs and buys. How you doing? Small talk in your neighborhood, in your group. And the reason why I say this to leaders is a lot of times as leaders, when we see people, a lot of times we instantly think, okay, how can we use them? So good, it's like, man. It becomes like, okay, do I see them on stage? Do I see them as a leader? Do I see them working like, and that is a part of being a leader, is seeing potential. But you want to have relationships that are casual with people who you are not just watching and loving for their potential, but just who they are. The second thing that I would do to celebrate leaders, and this is kind of common, but I want to say it anyway, is find ways to give people of different people groups roles in every area of your church. Find small things for them to do. Like I'm speaking if you're leading, find small things. And this is why oftentimes it's the athletes that are highlighted. It's like you're not trying to go to the, the spelling bee. You know what I mean? Like all the time I can speak specifically in African Americans. If somebody's good at a sport, bro, it's like they skip the line. And a lot of times it feels like, oh, if I'm not good at a sport, then what's my value? If you want to find ways to give people little opportunities, even if they're scared or whatever, or they're not good, find roles to give them to help them build the confidence that my value is not in just being an athlete, or it's not just in being, I'm not the pretty or the cool kid or the this or the that, or I don't have the money to have this. Finding little roles and empowering people is huge for diversity. And the third thing I will say is, man, when things go on, when things happen in our nation, don't act like they didn't happen. Like, you have to understand, if it made it to your group, if you're working with leaders, like let's say you're a leader with leaders, have a conversation or bring it up with a few of them. Just kind of bring it up to let them know that this is something that's on your heart, that weighs. Even if you don't speak about it in your business or your service or whatever, bring it up to your leaders, like about what happened and how, like, you don't necessarily have the answers, but and it's really bothered you. Like, I don't understand it. So therefore, when the conversations start, and because there's going to be people with different views, and there's always people with different views about it. and the reason is when you're leaders, you want to make sure that even though somebody might have a political belief that makes them view things a certain way, you want to make sure, hey, let's make sure we are focused on the humanity of this.
Yeah.
And not just how this affects our, the politics of it. Like, let's make sure we're able to separate that and understand that, like, this is real. Whether you no, I'm not saying change your beliefs. I'm saying just make sure we look at the humanity of that in the group. So that's 3 things I would say.
Bro, thank you so much for all the wisdom, all the practical tips, just opening up, being raw and honest. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. We got to get you down here to El Paso, to Prime, to rock with us. Dude, we cannot wait to get you here. But thank you so much for your time. And everyone that's viewing, thank you for hanging out with us. We hope that you were blessed, encouraged, and that you're walking away with real plays, real moves that you can use so that you can win when it comes to celebrating diversity. God made us all to be one family. And hey, we can do this. It might be a little awkward at times, but let's fight through it. It is worth it. We love you. We'll see you back here next time on Button Mashing.